Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are exploring a really powerful, um, honestly thought-provoking philosophical text. It's titled Real Life is Meant to be Fun, Not Forced.
Yeah, it's a great piece.
It really is. And the mission for our time together today is pretty simple, but potentially, life-changing. We are going to examine exactly why our lives so often feel like this exhausting uphill grind.
Which is something I think everyone relates to right now.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to redefine what the word fun actually means in the context of being an adult. And most importantly, we're going to figure out how to get back into alignment when your day-to-day just feels impossibly heavy.
Right. It is a mission that feels incredibly necessary right now. The philosophy we are unpacking today, it acts as a mirror, reflecting a reality that so many of us have just quietly accepted as normal. It challenges the fundamental assumption that maturity inherently requires misery.
I want to talk directly to you, the listener, right now. Just think about your life for a second. Are your schedules endlessly piling up? Are your responsibilities multiplying by the day?
Like a hydra. You cut off one task and two more appear.
Exactly. Does your life currently feel like this constant, heavy effort where you're just pushing a boulder up a hill rather than experiencing any kind of natural forward momentum?
The myth of Sisyphus, basically.
Yeah. And if you are nodding your head while listening to this right now, maybe while you're commuting or, I don't know, folding laundry, you are definitely not alone. That feeling of forcing your way through the day is exactly what we are tackling today.
We are going to take a very analytical look at a highly emotional experience. We're taking a magnifying glass to your daily routines. And not to make you feel overwhelmed, but to give you a concrete framework to understand why that exhaustion is happening
Right.
and why it actually doesn't have to be the default setting of your existence.
So let's jump right into the diagnosis. The core premise here hits like a ton of bricks. It says many people experience life as something they must simply push through. It's this idea that the natural rhythm of life has just been completely lost.
Yes, rhythm is the operative word there.
It's like we're all swimming upstream, utterly exhausted, and we've forgotten that rivers naturally flow downwards.
That concept of a lost rhythm is absolutely central to understanding the broader argument. At its healthiest, life actually has a cadence. It requires a balance of three core dichotomies.
Which are?
First, effort and rest. Second, focus and play. And third, structure and freedom.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that sounds beautifully balanced in theory, but I'm guessing most of us are completely out of whack in practice.
Oh, completely. Think of it like a heartbeat or breathing. You cannot only exhale. If you try to only exhale, you pass out. The entire system collapses.
You literally die.
Right. When life becomes entirely forced, it means we have moved drastically out of alignment with this natural rhythm. We've turned up the volume on effort, focus, and structure to maximum capacity.
And we've muted the rest.
We have completely muted rest, play, and freedom. When you do that, life isn't a rhythm anymore. It's just a continuous grinding noise.
Which begs the question, why do we do this to ourselves? Nobody actively wants to feel like they're just grinding away, right? The source material outlines 6 distinct pressures that cause people to force themselves through situations. Let's look at the first one. Fear of failure.
Fear of failure is arguably the loudest internal pressure. When you are terrified of failing, you stop acting out of curiosity or joy, and you start acting purely defensively.
Defensive living.
Yes. Every action becomes about preventing a negative outcome rather than creating a positive one. You force yourself to over-prepare, overwork, and overanalyze. You treat life like a high-stakes exam. You are terrified of failing rather than an experience you are having.
That makes so much sense. It's like when you spend 2 hours rereading a simple 3-line email to your boss because you're terrified of a typo making you look incompetent. You're just bracing for impact 24/7.
Exactly. And that defensive posture drains your reserves incredibly fast. Which leads us to the second pressure, which is the expectations of society, the invisible script.
The timeline we're all supposedly meant to follow.
Precisely. Society hands us a definition of success. Get this degree, buy this house, reach this specific job title by the time you're 35.
And if you don't, you've failed.
That's the implication. So we force ourselves into situations, careers we don't actually like, social circles we don't genuinely enjoy, because we are trying to satisfy a societal expectation. We're wearing a suit that is 2 sizes too small, but we force ourselves to keep it on because society says it's the right brand.
I love that analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine that societal pressure naturally breeds the third pressure, which is comparison with others. Because if we're all handed the same rigid timeline, we immediately start looking left and right to see who is getting to the finish line first.
Comparison amplifies everything. You might actually be perfectly content with your steady, comfortable pace. You might love your modest apartment and your quiet weekends.
Right.
But then you open a professional networking site, or you look at someone's highlight reel on social media and you see a colleague's massive promotion or a friend's luxury vacation. Suddenly, your contentment evaporates. You feel inadequate.
So you start sprinting. Not because you actually want to run, but because someone else is running.
Yes. You force yourself into a sprint that isn't your natural rhythm, strictly because you are measuring your behind-the-scenes reality against someone else's curated public image.
But let's be real for a second. Sometimes it's not just about keeping up with the Joneses. Sometimes it's literally about paying the mortgage, which brings us to the fourth pressure, financial stress. This one feels a lot less philosophical and a lot more, well, literal.
We absolutely cannot ignore the reality of survival. Financial stress kicks the brain into an entirely different gear. When you are worried about paying rent or feeding your family, the concept of finding your natural movement feels like an absurd luxury.
Yeah, you're not thinking about a balanced rhythm when you can't buy groceries.
Exactly. You force yourself through grueling hours or endure deeply toxic work environments because the alternative feels physically threatening. Survival overrides the entire system.
So how does that temporary survival mode turn into a permanent state? Because the fifth pressure from the text is the habit of overworking. It seems like even when the financial crisis passes, the grinding just doesn't stop.
That is the ultimate trap. What starts as a temporary financial necessity or a brief, intense push for a promotion hardwires itself into your routine. Overworking becomes a behavioral habit, and eventually it becomes an identity.
You literally forget how to be still.
Think about the guilt you feel on a Sunday afternoon if you are just sitting on the couch doing nothing. If you aren't forcing yourself to be productive, you feel actively anxious. The habit itself becomes the master long after the original need for it has faded.
Okay, I feel personally attacked by that Sunday afternoon example. I really do. But it ties perfectly into the final pressure. The deeply ingrained belief that life must always be difficult. We've built an entire culture around the hustle.
It is a fascinating cultural artifact. We have completely romanticized the struggle. We have internalized this extreme version of no pain, no gain, to the point where if something feels easy or enjoyable, we immediately become suspicious of it.
It's like we're cheating somehow.
We actually believe that suffering validates our existence. If we aren't miserable and exhausted, we assume we must not be working hard enough.
Wow. When you lay all six of those, out-defensive fear of failure, the invisible societal script, endless comparison, raw financial stress, the addiction to overworking, and the romanticization of suffering, it is a miracle any of us have a drop of energy
A
left.
heavy cocktail. And to synthesize the core argument here, these 6 pressures form a thick, heavy armor around us. And that armor makes us completely numb to what actually feels natural. We lose our internal compass because the external noise of these pressures is deafening.
So what does this all mean for our daily lives? If we're buried under this armor, how do we even begin to break out of it? The source material suggests that under all this pressure, we stop asking the simplest, most fundamental questions about our own lives. We just put our heads down and march.
We lose the ability to perform a basic alignment check. To counter this, there are 3 incredibly simple yet devastatingly effective questions that we completely forget to ask when we are trapped in the cycle of forcing life. The first one is simple, but honestly quite brutal. Do I actually enjoy this?
That is brutal. Mostly because I think a lot of us actively avoid asking it. If you're halfway through a major career pivot or, say, a massive home renovation, you don't want to ask if you enjoy it because you know the answer is no and you feel like you're in too deep to stop.
Exactly. We avoid the question to avoid the cognitive dissonance, which leads right into the second question. Does this give me energy?
That's an interesting way to frame it. It's like looking at your life as a battery. Certain tasks, even if they are hard work, actually charge the battery. You finish them feeling fired up. But other tasks, even seemingly easy ones, just drain the battery completely.
Yes, it's about net energy. And that brings us to the third question. Is this aligned with who I am?
The friction of pretending. Wearing a mask all day at a job that conflicts with your core values is exhausting. It takes so much invisible effort just to maintain the facade. I want to challenge you, the listener, right now. Just pause. Run your current day or a massive project you're currently in the middle of through those 3 questions. Do you enjoy it? Does it give you energy? Is it aligned with who you are?
It is a confronting exercise, because if the answer to all 3 is no, then you aren't really living. You are merely enduring. And this brings us to a major pivot in the philosophy we're exploring today, specifically regarding how we define a single three-letter word: fun.
Yes, fun. When we hear that word, especially in a professional or adult context, it usually sounds incredibly irresponsible. It sounds like blowing off work, eating cake for breakfast, abandoning your inbox, and moving to a beach. It sounds like the opposite of being a mature adult.
What's fascinating here is how the text completely redefines fun. It is not about escapism. Fun does not mean avoiding responsibility. Instead, fun is redefined as natural engagement. The author breaks down this natural engagement into 5 specific elements. The first is curiosity.
That feeling of being pulled down a rabbit hole. When you actually want to know the answer to something, the research doesn't feel like work.
Precisely, it pulls you forward. The second element is creativity, the space to inject your own unique perspective into a task.
Right, and creativity isn't just painting a picture. It could be finding a totally new, visually appealing way to format a dry slide deck just because it pleases you to make it look good.
Yes, autonomy is key there. The third element is challenge, but crucially, a challenge that stretches you rather than snaps you.
The Goldilocks zone. Not so easy that you're bored to tears, but not so impossibly hard that you're paralyzed by anxiety.
Exactly. You need that friction to stay engaged. The fourth is connection, feeling linked to others or feeling that your work serves a broader purpose beyond just yourself.
Being in the trenches with a team you actually respect and like. That camaraderie makes even late nights bearable.
Humans are social creatures. We need that. And the fifth element is learning, the tangible sensation of growth, the realization that you are more capable today than you were yesterday.
So if your day-to-day actually incorporates those elements, if you're naturally curious, injecting your own spin on things, being stretched just enough, working with good people, and leveling up your skills, the actual volume of work stops feeling so heavy. You could work a 10-hour day and feel exhilarated.
Because it is natural engagement. To illustrate this, think about children. Children are the ultimate case study in this concept.
Absolutely. Kids will spend 4 straight hours outside, covered in dirt, building a wildly complex fort out of sticks and mud. They are exerting massive amounts of physical and mental effort, but they aren't forcing themselves to perform for a quarterly review. They aren't worried about their brand. It's just pure, unadulterated engagement with the physical world.
But as adults, we trade the playground for the cubicle, not just physically, but mentally. We assume that if we are smiling or if we are energized by a task, we must not be taking it seriously enough. There is a profound quote in the source material that perfectly counters this exact mindset. A life that contains no enjoyment becomes exhausting. A life that contains only entertainment becomes shallow.
Well, let's linger on that for a second. A life that contains no enjoyment becomes exhausting. A life that contains only entertainment becomes shallow.
It's a brilliant distillation of the human condition. If you lean entirely into the forced, grind-pure effort, no enjoyment, completely ignoring the alignment check we just discussed, your spirit literally exhausts itself. You burn out. But if you swing the pendulum entirely to the opposite extreme and seek only passive entertainment, binge-watching television all weekend, endless scrolling, actively avoiding all friction and effort, your life becomes incredibly shallow. It lacks depth, meaning, and growth. The ultimate balance lies perfectly between those two extremes. It's engaged effort.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because if you're listening to this and thinking, okay, this sounds lovely, but I have a demanding boss, a mortgage, and strict deadlines. I can't afford to just prioritize enjoyment. The counterintuitive point here is that enjoyment actually improves performance. Living well doesn't require abandoning enjoyment. It literally relies on it if you want to function at a high level.
The mechanics of play directly influence our output. It is a biological and psychological chain of cause and effect. First, when a person is genuinely interested in what they are doing, their attention naturally becomes stronger. You don't have to force focus. Focus is simply the byproduct of interest.
It's like how you never have to force yourself to pay attention to a movie you love. But reading a dry financial report takes monumental, exhausting effort. The focus comes for free when the interest is there.
Precisely. Second, when people feel safe and relaxed, creativity exponentially increases. From a neurological standpoint, when you are incredibly tense and forcing things, driven by that fear of failure we discussed earlier, your brain enters a mild state of fight or flight.
Wait, let me make sure I'm getting this. So if I'm aggressively forcing myself to push through a deadline out of sheer panic and stress, my brain is literally shutting down the exact departments I need to actually solve the problem.
That is exactly what happens. In a fight or flight state, blood flow and activity shift away from the prefrontal cortex, which is the area responsible for complex problem solving, lateral thinking, and innovation.
Hmm.
Your brain is preparing you to run from a predator, not to write a nuanced strategy document. But when you are relaxed and engaged, you regain access to those higher order thinking centers. You can connect disparate ideas, you see solutions that were invisible when you were panicked, and finally, allowing moments of play decreases overall stress, keeping the system sustainable.
So fun is not the opposite of responsibility. That is such a vital takeaway. Fun or natural engagement is the fundamental energy that keeps life sustainable. It's the oil in the engine. If you drain all the oil out because you firmly believe the engine should just run on hard work and sheer willpower alone, the engine's going to seize up and catch fire.
A perfect analogy. So the ultimate question becomes, how do we pour the oil back in? How do we stop forcing it?
Yes. Let's pivot to the practical application. Because all of this philosophy is great, but how does it actually change our Monday morning? The first step advised is simply noticing. You have to notice where you are forcing yourself unnecessarily. It's about bringing a conscious awareness to that feeling of friction in your chest or your stomach.
And once you notice that friction, the approach is actually very nuanced. It doesn't blindly advocate for quitting your job, abandoning your family, and running away from all of your adult responsibilities. The key principle here is adjustment rather than escape.
Let's make that concrete. What does adjustment actually look like for, say, a dreaded weekly Zoom status meeting that absolutely drains your battery every Wednesday at 9 a.m.?
Adjustment means creating flexibility within the existing structure. For that meeting, can you change how it is approached? Could you propose turning it into a collaborative brainstorming session instead of a round-robin lecture? Could you suggest making it a 15-minute standing meeting instead of an hour-long sit-down? Or, looking at it from an individual level, can you add creativity to a routine task?
Right, like finding a way to sprinkle those elements of fun, curiosity, creativity challenge back into the mix. Gamifying your own inbox, or setting a timer to see if you can beat your own record for a repetitive task.
Yeah.
You are staying in the situation, but you are radically changing your internal posture toward it. But we also have to be realistic. Sometimes adjustment just isn't enough.
That is the hard truth of the secondary solution. Sometimes you have to recognize that a path simply no longer fits. If you have genuinely tried to adjust your approach, if you have tried to add creativity and foster connection, and the environment is still fundamentally misaligned with who you are and what gives you energy, the healthiest choice is to walk away.
Yeah.
Continuing to force it at that point is no longer discipline. It is self-destruction.
And it's so important to clarify here for the listener that deciding to stop forcing a path that doesn't fit does not mean you lack discipline. It's so easy to confuse the two.
It is a very common misconception. Discipline is absolutely necessary to achieve anything meaningful, but we must remember that human beings function best when they are engaged rather than trapped. Discipline fueled by curiosity and purpose looks very, very different from discipline fueled by fear and societal pressure.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we're really saying today is that life moves more naturally when our actions are driven by a genuine pull towards something, rather than just the push of pressure. Pressure will absolutely get you to the finish line, maybe, but you'll be a hollow shell when you cross it.
Exactly. When effort and enjoyment finally exist together in that natural rhythm, life stops feeling like a gauntlet. It stops feeling like an endless series of tasks you have to grit your teeth and endure. Instead, it begins to feel like a dynamic experience you actually participate in.
Enduring versus participating. What a massive paradigm shift. That is the difference between forcing life and actually living it.
It reframes our everyday struggles entirely. It gives us permission to take a breath and reevaluate our approach.
It really does. As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering thought to mull over. We talked about noticing where we force things and the power of adjustment. So think about your schedule for tomorrow. Just look at the calendar in your mind right now. What is one entirely mundane, forced routine you have to do? Maybe a brutal commute, cooking a Tuesday night dinner, or filling out a weekly report, that you could completely transform tomorrow simply by giving yourself permission to bring a sense of childlike curiosity, autonomy, or play to it.
It is a small adjustment, but it might just be the key to reclaiming your natural rhythm.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this conversation sparked something for you today. Keep questioning the defaults, keep seeking that natural engagement, and above all, keep learning.